Uganda.
It is Good Morning Uganda Agenda. Welcome and thank you so much for being with us on UBC TV. 8 minutes past the top of the hour. Once again, I'm Robert Chirabo Nyonyintono, and today we are here to discuss yet another issue of national importance and relevancy, and that is strategies out of Uganda's indebtedness. We must accept all developing countries, even the developed world, depend so much on loans for numerous projects, more so infrastructure for a country like Uganda. And these, over time, create debt burdens. Today, I want to see how best can we get out of this trap that some experts have said we are about to cross the red line. And with me in studios to discuss this morning is Musinguzi Gilbert, who happens to be the Quality Assurance Manager, Uganda Debt Network, people that advise and carry out strategies on how best we can manage, we can service our debt. Gilbert, you're most welcome to our studios this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chirabo. Good morning, viewers.
Well, to take things first, let's first of all give a background to our viewer. Why do we get these debts as a country, and where are we right now in terms of reaching the red line?
Okay, thank you. To begin with, borrowing, it's a global phenomenon, so to speak. There's no country that does not borrow. In one of the languages, they say a person who does not borrow may embarrass people from their end. So we borrow, and that is a given. The reason why we borrow is because we do not have adequate resources to fund our needs. We have every year an annual budget. Currently, our annual budget, the budget of 2020-21 is around 45 trillion. But out of this, we can only mobilize less than even a half. Uganda Revenue Authority collects some money for us to facilitate the works that we need to address. But then we find that the needs are still more. So to that extent, we have to get resources from somewhere. And there is someone out there who is willing to provide resources in order to make up, to cover up for the gap. So because we have the budget gap, it's that reason why we borrow.
Let's also look at the different types of loans, because many times we've seen experts in the financial sector sometimes talking about this was a bad loan. Our negotiators didn't do a good job. Recently, we saw the Minister of Finance and Economic Planning, Matia Kasaja, before the Parliamentary Committee on Issues of Entebbe Airport, where he said, well, there were some gaps in negotiation. Maybe this, but that is what was there anyway. So let's understand, what are some of these different types of loans that countries go to, and if Uganda, we are making the right choice in terms of loan selection?
Okay. There are different types of loans. One, depending on where it is coming from. So to that extent, we say the loans can be internal or external, meaning that they are generated from within the boundaries of the country, or they are got from outside. The other angle to which you need to look at the loan is the nature of the loan itself. There are types of loans like concessional loans and then non-concessional loans. Concessional loans refer to monies that you get from, resources that you get from a partner, an aid partner, at a negotiated settlement, and usually they take some longer time, relatively long time, and the rates are much lower. Examples of agencies or institutions that provide such loans are, say, international agencies like IMF, like World Bank. Sometimes they are bilateral countries like DFID, France, EU, and the like. Those are concessional loans. They are fair in nature. They take a long time to mature, and they are kind of considerate, and they are from those multilateral countries to which we are kind of members. But then there are non-concessional loans. Non-concessional loans are, you come, you take it or leave it. Here is the money we are giving you. You have this need, and therefore, these are the terms which we need you to address in order to get this loan. And usually, this is a recent development. Particularly a country like China has of recent been giving loans to Uganda through Exim Bank and Direct and other means. Usually, non-concessional loans, they have high interest rates that are very high, and sometimes you find that they have some like attachment. Failure to do this, you might end up getting this. The conditions are quite stringent, and at the same time, the rates are high, and the period during which payments should be made, the period is much shorter. So those are the non-concessional loans. Then domestically, we also borrow. We can borrow, for example, from, we are indebted, for example, in bonds. You can also borrow internally from some banks. We have like NSSF, which has money that is not yet due for payees to receive. So government can touch that bit of that. There are a number of internal sources that you can also borrow from. But at the same time, you can also get some services or goods on credit, in which case, to that extent, one can also consider that as a loan, because it is payable after a certain time. So those are the kinds of sources that we get from funds. And may I hasten to add that we also have something called grants. Sometimes you can get grants, and grants are also supplementary to the funding gap of the country. So that's another element where sometimes the country sees and says, you have this problem, let us give you this money, which you may not necessarily pay back in terms of like with those other interest rates and the like. Yeah.
Well, many a times you've heard this talk of our debt burden has gone so far, reached scary levels. Let's also look at an insight of our debt burden as Uganda. I was reading some financial analyst who wrote that the debt burden we have puts 1.5 million shillings per Ugandan. That is what a Ugandan, every Ugandan is being owned of the 45 plus population we have.
We have a debt, for example, currently, the ratio, the debt to GDP ratio of Uganda is around 30 sorry, it's over 30%. I mean, it's almost like that, around 30%. So the money is a lot, in the sense that considering, well, there is a debt, but then there is also the debt servicing. We have a responsibility to pay back. Some of the loans, because they have taken a long time without being paid, they have accumulated interest, a high level of interest. And we are approaching, for example, defaulting on those particular loans, in which case you must ensure that at least you provide for debt servicing. So within the budget, we have another component. We have the component of the revenues that we are going to get from domestic resources like taxes, URA, and like other sources like maybe fines, different internal sources. But then we also have loans which we get directly from those. But then we have the component of the responsibility to pay back, that is debt servicing. So debt servicing plus the actual debt itself, it constitutes more than 40% of the national budget annually.
And what could be the safest, the safest, could we call it ceiling? How safe are we if we are to look at when Ugandans can really panic that our debt has gone overboard?
International bodies and experts have prescribed what they call a threshold. That is, they say a country should never exceed 50% of its annual budget. We are approaching that. At least the available information, the publicly available information, is that we are around 45, 49, approaching there to 45, 49% of the national budget is debt. But we, at least some of the information we dig down, we find that actually we are almost surpassing that mark.
The threshold.
The threshold of 50%. 50% meaning 50 is debt and 50 is development. So that threshold, we are exceeding it. But let me hasten to add, some countries have capacity even to exceed that threshold. I was looking at statistics, like Japan has even 200%. America has like 100 something. So it is not much as that threshold is there. But we also look at another criterion, that is the ability to even make good on that promise. So in addition to your to the issue of the threshold, you should consider that in case you find you have a chance to cross the red line, you should prove that your history proves that you are capable of paying back even shortly after that. But the reason why they give you this is that as you are progressing towards this mark, there has been a trend. So this trend is an indicator of your creditworthiness. And therefore, once you reach there, then there is a possibility that you will default. And so that's why they set up that threshold, and that threshold is Uganda is exceeding, and our nature, our trend, our history reveals that we have a number of times defaulted. And to that extent, I mentioned a little bit about our history, that right from the 60s and the 70s and the other times, Uganda has been borrowing. But we reached a point where in 1996 or thereabout, we were so highly indebted, and we, Uganda and other developing countries, we were unable, and partners came out and said, okay, there was a negotiated, and highly indebted poor countries were given a reprieve. They forgave them the debt. Meaning that if we were to retain that debt, of course we were on the brink of
getting back
default,
to where we are.
we were almost defaulting at that time. Actually, we had defaulted in some of the areas. But then when they forgave us, we again, medics talk about relapsing. We relapsed, we went back to where we were by contracting debts and not fully paying back. So that is the trend, and it's very negative, and we need not go there. Yeah.
You've talked about the threshold, we've talked about also the types of loans we have, but let's look at the responsibility to service and pay these loans. Where does it fall?
The borrower is the one to pay back the loan. Uganda is the one which has borrowed, and therefore it's the one to pay back. Who is Uganda? Uganda is a country, that geographical expression, plus the people that stay in it. So the Ugandans are the ones who are responsible for paying back the debt. When we are talking about 1.5 billion or something per capita indebtedness, that's what I think the genesis was from that point, that one Ugandan owes around 1.5 million in order to pay that. That if we were to split out of the 45 million or so, if each of us was to share and say, let us pay back, and we come to zero, we would need around 1.5 million Uganda shillings, each person, your son, your daughter, my son, myself, everybody, if we are getting it squarely. But look again at it this way. How many, what is the per capita income? And especially of recent with the COVID case, you know very well that very many people, when you move around, there are some people who cannot even afford to get 2,000 shillings in a month. So if you tell him 1 million or so, 1.5, that is really, I mean, it's so ideal. We can't reach there. So the person who is supposed to pay the debt is the Ugandans themselves. But the capacity is highly lacking. There may be people who are rich, yes, but they have other responsibilities. And we were just giving statistics of distribution of the debt. But at no point are we going to come and say, get money, pay back this debt. It's only recently when I heard this case of, is it Entebbe Express Highway, when they are saying, for these services, you are going to get money and be paying so that we pay back the people who constructed
This was also an agreement in terms of loans from the Exim Bank of China.
That is it. That other condition.
That the condition is people passing on this road
are going to pay.
To with the servicing of, of this loan?
It fits into that definition we are talking about. That at no point have we ever previously heard that you are getting this loan, but we are going directly to tag the individual user of that facility. Previously, of course, most of the social services, education, health, agric, and whatever, previously those sectors, we were getting services from them either free or indirectly, maybe indirectly because we pay taxes. But at no point would you go, and when you are moving by the road, they say use. Previously, we used to have road tolls, I remember Lukaya and whatever, but it had kind of been phased off. And now the road tolls are back again. Concessional loans, that's what they bring, and probably we are yet to get another angle to it. But
Musinguzi, let's look at alternatives, because you now want to look at strategies out of Uganda's indebtedness. Let's look at now other alternatives to this borrowing. If they are, what are they?
The alternatives are, in other words, how did we get there? One alternative is to cut our coat according to the cloth we have. When we look at the national budget, if you scrutinize it, you will find that there are some of the things that are, they call this negatory expenditure, things which we can negate, which we can ignore and not consider. How many times must someone, a public officer, travel abroad back and forth? Of course, when they travel, they have per diem, they have assistance, they have what? Recently, COVID helped us a bit by making it mandatory. Not even the president was able to move out. Can you imagine how much the president requires in order to move out of the country? It goes with the security, with the advisors, the whole number of so many of those. That one. How many advisors does the president have? And each of those attracts a remuneration exceeding, around the ministerial remuneration level. And probably in each of these, they are advising on issues which are also already provided for in public service. There are ministries, departments, and agencies which are responsible for implementing most of these presidential advisor position mandate. Could we do away with some? To what extent can we, for example, afford districts, cities that are being created of recent,
which are staggering in terms of finance?
The bloated parliament of 500 people who cannot get an opportunity even to raise an arm and speak. So if one of the ways is to cut the cloth by its what, then the other bit, of course, is to increase the revenue. Uganda, I mean the tax base, to expand the tax base so that we get more taxes than we are generating. When URA is predicting, sometimes its officers may not necessarily catch some people. We, you have a responsibility to pay taxes where we ought to. But if we don't pay taxes, then we shall leave a gap, which gap will be addressed by debt. I remember the other day our honorable members, how they fought vehemently in order to avoid tax, and of course we lost it because they are the only legislators. They are, some of their remuneration is non-taxed. And yet these are the high-end people. So options for taxation, we need to widen and also accept responsibility to pay. Then there is also the issue of these tax holidays. There are some foreign direct investors who come, and because we paint a picture of desperation, we give them tax holidays, sometimes for a long time, even when they don't deserve. And yet local entrepreneurs or local investors or even producers, they are not in any way getting any provision for tax holiday. So tax holidays, they should be realistic and ensure that when you are giving a tax holiday to some investor, consider the extent to which some of them are getting tax holidays and yet they are able to even produce and get high-end a lot of revenues, and some of them are shipping them out. So that's another area.
Profit repatriation.
Repatriating all the money.
Yes,
at least if it was a local investor, probably the profit would have been invested locally, apart from those papers we're talking about offshore. Other element is, what are the leakages? There are a lot of leakages out of our budget, which if we were plugging them, then there would also be a chance of having, even if it's smaller money, but doing a lot. So we have a lot of corruption, and it's happening. The president has acknowledged, IGG and others, everybody has said corruption, corruption. And it has, of course, been a repetitive, a recurrent issue in every other manifesto of every other 5 years that happen, to the extent that we look at it as a joke. When you say hakuna mchezo, this time, whatever, we have even lost count of the name tags of all those. So the leakage is another element. Then there is the issue of cost. Even some of these, most of the projects, the costs are high. You have heard several times when they talk about the cost per kilometer rate of Ugandan roads. That when you compare the roads with the same mileage and the same quality of the road would ordinarily cost much lower in some countries than Uganda. And actually Uganda has been rated among the highest, in the most costly in terms.
Given as well as being geographical location,
we talk of
the landscape and all that.
Which country doesn't have this geography? I mean, our neighbors, the Rwandans, they have almost similar topography. So those are some of the options that we can consider. And a host of others. Of course, there has also been the element of recurrent supplementary expenditure need. You remember when the last year was just about to end, remaining with less than 1 month.
We went for supplementary.
We requested for a supplementary. When it had just started, we asked for a supplementary. Today, this morning, I was listening to the news where about 5-6 ministries are requesting for supplementary. Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Education, Ministry of what? All those are requesting for supplementary. As if they didn't budget. This is 4 months down the road. What was the budget for? Then, of course, there was, I talked about the unnecessary expenditure. We have repeatedly talked about
unnecessary expenditure.
Yes.
Well, just remind our viewers that you can be part of the topic of discussion this morning by simply going to our various social media platforms. Send us a message there, and I will be reading it out, and Musinguzi will be responding to that. Also, you can use our WhatsApp number, which is on your screen, 070960 2592. 070960 2592, and we will be reading them out. You can also send us the traditional SMS. Just go to your phone, send us that SMS message, and we'll be discussing that. Well, Musinguzi, also much as we are looking at how best we can get out of this, I want us also to focus on making proper usage of these loans. Recently, when the First Lady was launching, that is, I think it's the anti-corruption campaign for this year.
Yes.
She mentioned an incident where she went to a place and monies had been spent on this place. She didn't give us the particular part or how much was given, but she said 2 times, and what she found there was, I think, a windmill in a bush somewhere. But some of these monies could be loans. So how are we making proper use of this money? Our minister, State Minister for Economic Monitoring, he has been touring a number of parts of this country. But he reaches somewhere and says, we got a loan for this project. What you're showing me are works of an non-government organization. So how do we, because at the end of the day, it seems we may get a loan for the same thing, yet nothing is being done. And that will reflect on our budget as well, and loan burden.
Thank you. We can also start a little bit slightly earlier in terms of debt contraction. Debt contraction, when you are planning to get a debt, we should do adequate preparation. You have done a feasibility study. You have known who are going to be the project affected persons. You have known how much matching fund you will require for this loan in order to be effective. The money is released. But when the money is released, in some instances we have found the money has come, but the matching fund, you had said you need let's say 20 billion, but you said you are going to supplement around 10. But the 10 you claimed you were going to add is not there. So the money has not started. 2, you said you were going to do due diligence in terms of whether procurements or whatever, but they are not ready. Preparations are not adequately done in terms of loan servicing. You have the money comes, and the moment it enters your treasury like this, these people, the clock starts ticking, the time is approaching when you should be paying the loan. So due diligence in terms of preparation is highly lacking, and there are a number of loans in Uganda that we have seen, roads and whatever, where 2-3 months down the road, nothing has been done. I don't want to talk about Lubowa hospital, which has now spent, is it 3 years? Which even when the minister went to check, they stopped them from even inspecting what is going on. So up to now, and yet within 10 years, we are supposed to have started taken off, and yet it hasn't started. So adequate preparation is an issue. Then the other bit is, it's to do with procurement. We talked about corruption. We talked about, or I mean, there are issues of kickbacks. Some of the instances you'll find that there are negotiations behind the scenes, which, if not fulfilled, are also delaying.
Do we have the right negotiators for these loans? That's also something I want to add on that.
Do we have the right negotiators?
Yes.
You had in the previous parliament, today we are in 11, the 10th parliament, when there was a reshuffle in the opposition camp, some people were talking about we are going to spill the beans or whatever. Some of these accountability committees, we have had some of them members themselves saying, when you go out, whether benchmarking or doing what, there are some things you discuss outside the forum, in which case you end up either approving a loan which necessarily you wouldn't have
a dangerous loan.
Approved, conditions which wouldn't have, because probably something could have happened. I mentioned
kickbacks.
I mentioned previously that there was a book called Confessions of an Economic Hitman. This book talks about those development partners, how sometimes they come and develop a model. You know, we are economists, but our economics sometimes is not that high level. They will draw a model, give you a model, give a trajectory, and say, if you build this power dam, this is going to be the generation, and when you target to the kind of development it will cause, Uganda will be a middle income country. You produce the power, when it is done, you find that actually you have excess, people are not utilizing the money. So why couldn't you, at the beginning, since you have little money, why couldn't you go for a smaller or a lower type of version which will be adequate for you, rather than buying something that you are not going to utilize? Yes. So that's another element. I mentioned about procurement and corruption, but then now when the loan has taken off, procurement processes delay. Even consideration of these applications where some people are claiming they have been cheated out of the process, things like that. The process of procurement is also an issue.
Well, sorry to cut you short, but in the interest of time, let me first look at some of the messages that are coming in. Thank you so much for this feedback and being part of this show. Well, I'll begin with, please let's have your name as well. Thanks, moderator and guest. During the past, this is Deus Mbarara. Government should reduce on expenditure. They get a loan and buy expensive vehicles and security allowances for the loan. If it is timely used and effectively, there is no way we should cry of debt reduction, corruption, or he's talking about proper usage. And that was thanks. It's Dr. Joshua. Please, thank you for the program. Sir, good morning, Uganda. And Uganda, please. Okay, Dr. Joshua in Gulu, thank you so much for being part of this show. Then I have debt has increased due to increase in our expenditure. One, many districts and leaders' expenditure. We have so many districts, and that goes for leaders. Then the Uganda's economy production is too low to the extent that we import much if what we use, like cars and fuel, soon much we borrow us and also spent outside the counter. We need general public transport like trains. Okay, he's talking about expenditure as well. I think let's first go with those. The rest I'll be reading them as time as we move on. Yes, first it talks about so much of unnecessary expenditures. I think something we also discussed.
I was talking about the procurement process, and I was saying we have also seen cases of like somebody hurries you up. In my workplace, our accountant had written something, and he said, delay on your part should not mean haste on mine. You do your adequate preparation, submit your requisition in time, and I also do the. But for you to come and say, hey, hurry up, please sign here, before I have reviewed, you want me to sign because the manager is going, you know. So likewise, sometimes we have seen this kind of behavior within government. The other day when we were talking about Uganda, Uganda, even that Lugoa case, we saw cases where they have done all the work, even signed agreements, and then they come to Parliament for the approval. Where were you all along? You did proposals, you did what? You never considered going to Parliament, and you are bringing the information there. So that's another element that we consider. So when they give us a raw deal, they give us a raw deal because we didn't get time to review and scrutinize and see the affordability of the debt. So the procurement process sometimes is also an issue. We are talking about now the contraction at national level, but at parliamentary approval level, because every loan to get through, at least there must be parliamentary endorsement. But you find State House has said, if we do not append our signatures within this time, we shall be sued. And of course that is like a blackmail. They are putting you at a gun and say, you approve, or else.
We have repercussions.
There are repercussions, and we shall be, yes.
If we do not get this money and pay then the outcomes, you are going to be fined to
you
pay
can imagine.
Huge sums of money.
Which is no improper. Choice. We have no choice, so you take it. Now, of course, you asked a little bit about the underhand methods. Sometimes the pressure from donors is much. It's on record. The other time, the Minister of Finance admitted that there's a loan which World Bank said, if you don't get, you must get this loan or else. Has it something to do with gender or something? There's an activity that we didn't necessarily need. But the minister said, World Bank insisted that we need to get this loan, otherwise, so it was conditioned that if you don't get this loan, the other loan also you'll not get.
Well, Musingu's, in the interest of time, let me have your final remarks regarding how best we can reduce our debt burden, also how best we can ensure that we really, at least where possible, can avoid some of these unnecessary borrowings or not properly scrutinized loans that we take as a country.
Civil society organizations and experts gave some advice, because we are partners in development as a country, and this country belongs to all of us. We advise that the issue, of course, in addition to the laws that are there established, we also gave some checklist which one could consider before you approve a loan. But up to now, it hasn't been put in place. Follow the law, follow the procedure of contracting a loan. There is Public Finance Management Act. That requires some due diligence, and there is a point at which everybody should play their part. They are talking about the percentage to which the government can ask a supplementary, 3%. But then sometimes, in the majority of the cases, the supplementary requests are way exceeding 10% or whatever. Of course, the issues of corruption. Go ahead and let the institutions play their part. Minimize issues of duplication. Duplication, you talked about now, First Lady having entered into the anti-corruption campaign. There's IGG, there's Nakalema, there's so many players. Each of those, that kind of duplication, well, everybody is responsible for fighting corruption, but to what extent? And then utilize the resources that have been given to you in accordance with the provision. Don't exceed, I mean, they are bloated, what do they call them, bills of quantities that are exceeded, even when you see that this is way too high. So let every loan that we are contracting be citizen-centered. Otherwise, because the citizen is the one ultimately who is responsible for paying back this loan.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Musinguzi Gilbert. That is the Quality Assurance Manager, Uganda Debt Network, that are responsible also for ensuring checks and balances, but also advising government. Do not forget the important role you played with the development partners when we were calling to ensure that Uganda is part of its debt.
And that process is also on.
It's again on?
Yes.
Okay, we hope and pray that it really succeeds. Have a lovely day. I'll leave you with Ruben Kasera Chibida and will take you through the world of sports. Please don't forget, if you're not yet vaccinated, go and get that jab. We need to prevent death. And even when you're tested, please perfect the soaps. We don't want the infection rates to go high. We need to reopen, but reopen in a safe manner. God bless you. Catch you tomorrow, same day, same time. Keep it on UBC TV.
Kagalino twalekedde ekyatulese tuzze tukalanga enfunda eziwerako ddala.